Billionaire suffers accident before the wedding and falls into a coma, but what he sees when he wakes up. Hello, welcome, enjoy, subscribe, and activate notifications. It was the most anticipated wedding of the year. The charming young man, Alex Turner, heir to one of the most renowned fortunes in Los Angeles, was about to marry Olivia Grant, a socialite seemingly born to live in the spotlight. The entire city seemed to breathe the event, and the media spoke of nothing else. Everything was perfectly planned. Exotic flowers, a unique dress by a famous Italian designer, and guests including the country's top personalities. But on that day, something lingered in the air. Alex was nervous. In fact, nervous was an understatement for what he felt. He was agitated, almost suffocated. It was as if, at that moment, the perfection he so sought was crumbling inside. He looked at himself in the mirror while adjusting his suit. He was impeccable as always, but something in his eyes revealed turmoil. He grabbed his car keys, even with his driver waiting, needing a moment alone. Just him and his thoughts. He needed to breathe. As he drove through the bustling streets of Los Angeles, his mind raced faster than the car. This is what you always wanted, isn't it? He asked himself. Since childhood, he knew he would have it all one day. Money, fame, power. But why did he feel something was missing? Olivia was beautiful, sophisticated, the ideal partner for someone like him. But increasingly, he questioned whether their connection was truly deep or just a perfect projection for the world. Alex gripped the steering wheel, trying to push away the doubts consuming him. As he crossed an intersection, it happened too suddenly. He didn't even have time when a truck sped from his left. The impact was brutal, the noise deafening. In a second, everything he knew collapsed. At the hospital, the rush was intense. Alex was rushed to the emergency room, his body motionless with severe injuries. Olivia arrived shortly after, still in her stunning white dress, which now seemed a cruel reminder of what the day should have been. Tears streamed down her impeccably made-up face as she looked at the man who was about to become her husband. "Please, Alex, wake up. You have to wake up," she whispered, holding his hand as if her words could bring him back to reality. The doctors did what they could. Multiple fractures, severe cranial trauma. The verdict, coma. The words echoed through the hospital's cold corridors, hitting Olivia like a blow. Initially, her sadness seemed genuine. She cried, hugged family and friends who came to support her, and even spent nights by Alex's bedside, holding his inert hand. But as days turned into weeks, Olivia's impatience began to show. During one of these visits, she watched Alex's motionless body, surrounded by machines keeping his vital signs constant. "This isn't fair," she murmured, running her hands through her hair. "Our future, all our plans, how long will I have to wait?" It was the first time she allowed her true feelings to emerge. Meanwhile, at the hospital, a new nurse started her shift in the intensive care unit. Sarah Collins was known for her dedication and always going beyond what was expected. When she was assigned to care for Alex, something inside her changed. He wasn't just another patient. There was something about his story, something in his eyes, even closed, that touched her deeply. She knew he wasn't just a millionaire in a coma. He was a man who, like anyone else, deserved care, attention, and perhaps a bit of hope. Initially, her work was purely professional, checking monitors, adjusting equipment, ensuring he was comfortable. But gradually, as days passed, Sarah began to feel something more. She felt that somehow Alex could hear her, that his soul was still there, fighting to return. During her night shifts, when the hospital seemed suspended in time, Sarah would sit beside Alex and talk to him. "Hey, Alex," she began one particularly quiet night. "I don't know if you can hear me, but I want to believe you can. Today was a long day, you know, but I'm here and I'll stay. I think you already know that." She laughed a little, knowing he couldn't react. "I brought some flowers. I don't know if you like roses, but I thought the room needed a happier touch." As days turned into weeks, Sarah felt she was forming an invisible bond with Alex. It was strange. After all, she didn't even know him before the accident. But somehow, he seemed a part of her routine, her life. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. As long as he fought to survive, she would be there. While Sarah remained by Alex's side, Olivia, now almost absent from the hospital, traveled from event to event, trying to fill the void left by her fiancé's absence. Her thoughts were no longer on Alex, but Sarah's heart was, and little did she know. That journey of care that had started so simply would become something much deeper than she ever imagined. Days at the hospital seemed to drag on, especially for Sarah. Each shift was a mix of silent routines and moments where she allowed herself to nurture an almost irrational hope that Alex would wake up. Alex's room was always impeccable. Sarah took special care to keep the environment as pleasant as possible. With flowers she brought herself and small details that made the place seem less sterile. Meanwhile, Olivia, who initially came almost daily, now appeared rarely. Her visits were brief and emotionless. She would enter, take a quick look at Alex, talk for a few minutes with the doctors, and soon leave in a hurry, always with a ready excuse. "I have a charity event tomorrow. I can't miss it. They've been counting on me for months," she told a doctor one afternoon. "Call me if there's any change, but I have to move on with my life." To an outside observer like Sarah, it became clear that Olivia's presence there was becoming increasingly mechanical. It was as if Alex was no longer part of her plans. During one of these visits, Sarah crossed paths with Olivia in the corridor. She was impeccably dressed as always, in an elegant dress and a designer bag slung over her shoulder. Olivia looked at Sarah, clearly recognizing her from previous visits. "You're the nurse taking care of Alex, right?" Olivia asked with a distant gaze. "Yes, that's me. I've been caring for him since he was admitted. Do you think he can still hear things?" Olivia asked without really seeming interested in the answer. Sarah hesitated. It was a difficult question because no one knew for sure what was going on in Alex's mind. "I like to believe he can," she replied calmly. "Sometimes, patients in a coma can hear and feel what's happening around them. That's why I keep talking to him, even if there's no response." Olivia nodded slightly, but seemed more focused on her own thoughts than on Sarah's explanation. "Well, I hope he wakes up soon. This is all so complicated. I had so many plans," Olivia said, looking out the hospital window as if imagining her life without Alex's presence. She then gave a last superficial glance at the room's door and left, leaving Sarah alone to reflect on the emptiness of Olivia's words. With each scarce visit from Olivia, the emotional distance between her and Alex became more evident. Not that she didn't care at all, but her luxurious life and social obligations always seemed more important. It was almost as if she were trying to convince herself that without Alex, her life could still shine. And indeed it did. Olivia was seen at gala events, exclusive parties, always smiling for the cameras as if nothing had changed. On the other hand, Sarah spent hours beside Alex, reading stories softly, gently touching his hands, hoping that somehow he could feel her presence. She brought fresh flowers to the room every week, creating a warmer atmosphere amid the coldness of medical equipment. The stories she read were carefully chosen. Once, she brought an adventure book. "I know you can't respond, Alex, but this book here is full of challenges and triumphs. I think you'd like it." And with a smile on her face, she began to read. As time passed, Sarah could no longer deny the bond she was forming with Alex. Although he was motionless and silent, she felt a growing connection, something that went beyond simple professional care. She began to know his tastes and preferences through stories she heard from doctors and family members who occasionally appeared. He was a lover of extreme sports, always seeking adrenaline. He was a man who liked to feel in control, but was now at the mercy of his own dormant body. One night, after a long shift, Sarah was especially tired but refused to leave the hospital without first stopping by Alex's room. "Hey Alex, here I am again," she said softly while arranging the flowers in the vase. "Today was a long day, you see. I hope you're resting. I'm sure when you wake up, you'll want to tell all about your adventures to whoever is by your side, and I hope to be here to listen." She sat in the chair beside the bed, looking at him for a few moments. The silence was heavy but was already part of Sarah's routine. "You know, Alex, I think you would have liked to meet my brother. He's a bit like you, always seeking something new, something exciting. And I just wanted you to know that while you're fighting in there, I'll be here rooting for you." Sarah knew her words might never be heard, but the simple act of talking to him gave her a sense of purpose. She didn't know what was happening inside Alex's mind, but she felt deep down that he wasn't completely lost. And that hope, however small, kept her by his side day after day. As the weeks passed, the contrast between Olivia's life and Sarah's dedication became even more evident. While Olivia traveled, attended parties, and maintained her active social life, Sarah remained by Alex's side, faithful, believing in something that even the doctors couldn't guarantee. She continued to care for him with the same dedication, expecting nothing in return, motivated only by the faith that he could somehow feel her presence. And somewhere deep in Alex's mind, lost between the void of the coma and reality, perhaps he was hearing everything. After months of an almost always predictable routine, life at the hospital was about to change unexpectedly. That morning, Sarah felt something different. The atmosphere seemed more charged with tension, almost as if something was about to happen. Upon entering Alex's room, she followed the same ritual as always, adjusting the pillow and checking the monitors. She then sat beside the bed, holding one of the books she had brought. She settled into the chair and, as usual, began to read in a low voice. "Today, I chose a classic for you. I think you'll like it. I always imagine you're the kind of person who identifies with the heroes of these stories." As she read, she noticed something that made her stop abruptly. Alex's fingers moved slightly. She blinked several times, trying to understand if what she saw was real or just a figment of her imagination. She stood up slowly, moving closer to the bed, her heart racing. "Alex, are you hearing me?" Another movement, this time a slight tremor in his eyelids. Sarah felt her breath quicken, her heart pounding in a way she never imagined possible. She pressed the emergency button to call the doctors, but couldn't take her eyes off Alex. "Alex, it's me, Sarah. Can you hear me? If you can, try to squeeze my hand." With his eyes still closed, Alex's hand moved slowly, squeezing Sarah's fingers with a weak but intentional force. Tears filled her eyes, and the emotion was almost impossible to contain. What seemed like a miracle was happening before her. The doctors rushed into the room, checking the vital signs and closely observing the signs of consciousness. Gradually, Alex began to open his eyes, first blinking with difficulty at the room's light. He seemed confused, lost between what was real and what his until then dormant mind was still trying to process. "Where am I?" he murmured, his voice weak and hoarse. One of the doctors approached, carefully explaining that he was in the hospital and had spent almost a year in a coma after a severe accident. Alex seemed to absorb the information in fragments, unable to process everything at once. He looked around, searching for something familiar. His head swirled with questions. Then his eyes landed on Sarah, who stood beside the bed with an expression of emotion mixed with relief. "Who are you?" he asked, even more confused. Sarah, with a trembling voice and an emotional smile, stepped forward. "I'm Sarah, Sarah Collins. I'm one of the nurses here at the hospital. I've been taking care of you all this time." Alex blinked a few times, trying to connect the dots. None of it made sense. His mind was foggy, but one thing was clear. This woman, Sarah, was a stranger to him. And Olivia? Where is she? "Where's Olivia?" he asked, still struggling to speak. The silence that followed was palpable. Sarah's heart tightened. She knew this moment would come, but wasn't prepared for the harsh reality that needed to be told. Still, she took a deep breath and tried to be as gentle as possible. "Olivia, she came to visit a few times, but she hasn't been very present in recent months." Alex frowned, struggling to understand. He had awakened from a nightmare that seemed endless, and now he found himself in a scenario even more disturbing. Olivia's absence, the person he imagined by his side, hit him hard. "But she was my fiancée. We were going to get married. Why isn't she here?" Alex's voice, still weak, carried a tone of disappointment. Sarah took a deep breath, trying to find the right words. "I'm not sure, Alex. At first, she came more often, but over time, her visits became more spaced out. She had other commitments." The impact of those words made Alex's chest tighten. The reality began to form in his mind. Olivia, the woman with whom he planned to spend the rest of his life, seemed to have moved on without him. The silence from Sarah confirmed what he didn't want to believe. Alex turned his face to the ceiling, feeling a whirlwind of emotions invade his mind. Disappointment, confusion, pain. Everything was mixed. He wanted to understand what had happened to his life while he was asleep, and at the same time, he feared the answers. So she didn't wait. She left me here? He asked bitterly. Sarah, sensing the pain in his words, felt a deep need to comfort him. But she knew there wasn't much she could say to ease the situation. I'm sorry, Alex. I know this is hard to hear, but from the beginning, you were never alone. I was here, and I always will be. Alex looked at her with a mix of gratitude and confusion. He didn't understand why this nurse, a complete stranger, seemed so involved in his recovery. Still, he felt grateful for not being completely abandoned. Amidst the desolation consuming him, there was a presence in his life, someone who, in some way, seemed to care. The following days would be full of discoveries and revelations. The days following Alex's awakening were an emotional roller coaster. He was physically weak, but the deeper pain was the one pulsing in his mind and heart. The time he spent in a coma seemed like a limbo, a place where nothing changed. But now that he was awake, the reality of his previous life crushed him. Every little memory of Olivia brought more questions and fewer answers. Sarah, as always, was there. At first, he remained silent, watching her as she adjusted his pillows, helped him get out of bed, and accompanied him to the physical therapy room. There was a kindness in her actions that unsettled him. She was there with no obligation, and over time, Alex began to realize that Sarah's care went beyond professionalism. It was genuine. One particularly difficult morning, Alex was sitting in the chair beside his bed, looking out the hospital window. The winter sun barely warmed the city, and the landscape seemed as gray as he felt inside. Sarah entered the room with the usual coffee, placing the cup on the table beside him. "Good morning, Alex. How are you feeling today?" she asked, always with the same caring tone. He sighed deeply before answering, his eyes still fixed on the window. "Physically better, but I'm still trying to piece things together here," he said, tapping lightly on his head. "I don't know how to deal with all this. The accident, Olivia, the time I lost. It's like my life stopped, and now I'm no longer the same." Sarah sat beside him, maintaining a respectful distance, but close enough for him to know he wasn't alone. "It's not easy, I know. You've been through something extremely difficult, but the important thing is that you're here now, and each passing day is a new chance to start over." Alex looked at her, trying to understand how someone who barely knew him could show so much empathy. "Why do you care so much? I'm just another patient, aren't I?" Sarah hesitated for a moment. She didn't know how to respond in a way that wouldn't seem intrusive or emotionally heavy, but the truth was that over the past year, she had become attached to him in a way she couldn't easily explain. "I don't know," she began softly. "I guess, in some way, I felt you needed someone to be here, even if you didn't know it. I've seen many people go through difficult times here at the hospital, but with you, there was something different. I wanted to be here." Alex remained silent for a few minutes, her words echoing in his mind. He had never experienced this kind of dedication before. Olivia was present, yes, but always in a distant manner, focused on appearances, on the image they projected to the world. He began to reflect on the time he was with Olivia. Life before the accident now seemed so distant, almost as if it belonged to another person. The parties, the social events, the luxurious dinners, all revolved around status, maintaining a perfect facade. And now, standing there without the distractions of his former life, Alex began to realize the emptiness of that existence. Meanwhile, Sarah remained by his side, silent, respecting his space. "I guess I never realized how superficial my life was before," Alex finally said, breaking the silence. "I fooled myself for so long, thinking I was living the perfect life with the perfect woman, but now everything seems so fake." Sarah looked at him gently, not wanting to force him to open up more than he was ready for. "Sometimes the toughest situations show us what really matters," she said. "It can be painful, but it can also be liberating." Alex nodded, still processing everything. He knew his relationship with Olivia had always been more about appearances than anything else. But now, after all he had been through, he felt different, as if he had a new perspective. And in this new perspective, Sarah shone with her own light. Just then, the door opened abruptly, and Olivia entered the room. She was impeccably dressed as always, with a smile that seemed more rehearsed than sincere. She paused for a moment, staring at Alex as if she were seeing a valuable piece she had lost and finally recovered. "Alex, thank God you're awake," she said, quickly walking towards him, completely ignoring Sarah's presence. "I knew you'd come back. I knew this nightmare would end." Alex blinked, surprised by her sudden appearance. He expected to feel relief or happiness upon seeing her, but all he felt was a slight discomfort. It was as if something was out of place, as if Olivia's presence no longer fit in his life the same way. "Olivia," he began, not knowing what to say. She smiled broadly, holding his hand. "Now that you're back, we can resume our plans. We can get married, continue from where we left off." Alex looked at her hand over his, and then at Sarah, who discreetly moved to the corner of the room, giving them space for their conversation. The emptiness he felt looking at Olivia was palpable, and at that moment, he knew something had changed forever. Days passed, and after Olivia's last visit, the tension in Alex's mind grew with each minute. Her presence reminded him of his old life, the life that seemed so perfect before the accident. She visited regularly, always impeccably dressed and full of energy, talking about the wedding they could still have, about the friends who asked about him, and how people missed him in social circles. "Alex, you have no idea how worried everyone was about you," Olivia said, holding his hand as if trying to reaffirm their connection. "We need to organize a return party, something grand. Everyone will want to see you again." Alex listened in silence, trying to absorb her words. He looked at Olivia and saw the same woman he had always known. Stunning, confident, determined to resume their life as if nothing had happened. But now there was something different in how he saw her. The glow she used to have in his eyes seemed more distant, almost artificial. While Olivia talked about the grandeur of their previous lives, Alex couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. She was a silent but constant presence. Sarah wasn't there to impress him with grand words or promises of a luxurious future. She was by his side simply for being there, and this contrast between the two women left him increasingly confused. One afternoon, while Olivia pressed to set a date for the wedding, Alex finally exploded. "Olivia, I don't know if I want to continue with these plans, not now." She blinked, visibly surprised. "What do you mean, Alex?" "Of course you do. We've been together for years. You always wanted this." He shook his head, feeling the weight of his words. "Things have changed, Olivia. I've changed. This accident made me think about so many things I never considered before. I don't know if I can just go back and pretend nothing happened." Olivia stepped back, her expression hardening. "Are you telling me you don't want to get married after everything we've been through?" Alex sighed, struggling to find the right words. He didn't want to hurt her, but he also couldn't ignore what he was feeling. And what he felt for Sarah grew each day, a deeper and more real connection than anything he had ever experienced. "I'm not saying I don't want to get married, Olivia," he began hesitantly. I just need more time. Time to understand what I really want, who I am now." Olivia remained silent for a moment, clearly trying to process what she was hearing. She had always been in control, always knew how to handle situations, but now Alex's uncertainty was something she couldn't control. "Is it because of that nurse?" she asked, her tone sharp. Alex stared at her, surprised by the question. "What? No, it's not that. Sarah, she's been here for a long time. She helped me a lot. But this has nothing to do with—" Olivia interrupted, raising a hand. "I saw the way you look at her, Alex. I'm not blind, and I think you need to decide what you want. Either we're together, or you can continue your simple little life with her. But you know very well that's not who you are." Olivia's words echoed in Alex's mind. She was right, in part. The life he and Olivia had was grand, full of glamour and status. It was a life many would dream of having. But at the same time, he couldn't deny what he felt when he was with Sarah. She was different from everything he knew, simple, authentic, and that attracted him in a way he had never imagined. Later that same day, Sarah entered Alex's room with her usual gentle smile. He felt her presence like a balm, a relief to the chaos in his mind. She immediately noticed something was different. "Are you okay, Alex?" she asked, sitting beside him with the same genuine concern he so admired. He looked at her for a moment, trying to process his own emotions. There was something about Sarah that made him want to be honest, not hide anything. "Olivia was here earlier," he said, his voice heavy. Sarah felt it without saying anything. She knew Olivia was part of his life, and even though she didn't like it, she respected it. "She wants to continue with the wedding plans, wants everything to go back to how it was before," Alex continued. "But I don't know if I can do that." Sarah watched in silence, trying to hide the pain she felt hearing about the wedding. She knew their relationship was complicated, that there was history between Alex and Olivia, and she couldn't interfere. "What do you want, Alex?" she asked calmly, her voice almost a whisper. He looked deeply into her eyes, feeling a confusion he had never felt before. "I don't know. I'm stuck between two lives, the life I thought I wanted with Olivia and this new reality with you, with something that feels more real." Sarah lowered her gaze, unsure of what to say. She didn't want to pressure him, but she also couldn't ignore what she was feeling. "I'll be here, whatever your decision," she finally said. "The important thing is that you do what makes you happy, Alex, what's right for you." Alex felt a tightness in his heart. He knew he was on the brink of a difficult choice, a choice that would change his life forever. Days passed slowly, and Alex found himself increasingly immersed in a spiral of questioning. The life that once seemed so linear and well-defined was now a puzzle without a solution. Something inside him couldn't accept the accident as a mere coincidence. The way everything happened, the speed with which he lost control of the car, seemed planned. Doubts began to corrode his thoughts, and the more he thought, the more something screamed in his mind. Something was wrong. One quiet afternoon, while Sarah was out handling some hospital matters, Alex decided to follow his instinct. He asked his personal assistant, Mark, to gather all the documents and police reports related to the accident. Mark, who had always been loyal to Alex, asked no questions, just obeyed. In a few hours, a folder full of information was on the table in front of him. "Here it is, Alex," Mark said, placing the papers on the table. "Accident reports, witness statements, anything we could find." Alex nodded, taking a deep breath. "Thank you, Mark. I just need to understand better what happened." Mark looked with a mix of concern and curiosity, but didn't press. He knew Alex was on a personal journey, and as much as he cared, he couldn't interfere. He left the room, leaving Alex alone with his suspicions. As he flipped through the documents, a series of details began to catch his attention. The police report indicated that the car's brakes had failed. However, the car had undergone maintenance a week before the accident, which should have ensured it was in perfect condition. More strangely, the mechanic who performed the checkup had disappeared shortly after the accident. None of this made sense. A growing sense of dread began to form in Alex's chest. He continued reading, his eyes now fixed on a small detail in a witness's statement. A woman claimed to have seen another car nearby moments before the accident, but this information was never considered relevant by the authorities. It was as if everything had been swept under the rug. "This wasn't an accident," Alex murmured to himself, feeling a knot form in his throat. Then he found something even more disturbing. Among the papers was a series of financial documents showing large transfers from Alex and Olivia's joint account shortly after the accident. The amounts were absurd, and the destination of the money was a mystery. It was then that a horrible thought crossed his mind. What if Olivia was behind it all? She had much to gain from his death, and the marriage, now that he was physically fragile, might not be as advantageous for her. Olivia's love, which he had always perceived as a bit cold and distant, suddenly seemed much darker. At that moment, Sarah entered the room, carrying a bouquet of flowers she usually brought to brighten the environment. Seeing Alex's expression, her own changed immediately. "Alex, what happened? You're pale." He looked at her, trying to process the mix of anger and disappointment boiling inside him. "Sarah, I think the accident wasn't an accident." She remained silent, surprised. "What do you mean? What are you saying?" Alex took a deep breath, closing his eyes for a moment to try to organize his thoughts. "There are things that don't make sense. The brakes failed, but the car was in perfect condition. The mechanic disappeared right after, and there are suspicious financial transfers in the accounts shortly after the accident." He paused, his voice trembling. I think Olivia might be involved. Sarah looked at him incredulously. Olivia? Alex, this is very serious. Are you sure? He shook his head slowly. I don't know, but everything is pointing to it. She had motives. Our relationship was unstable before the accident. She always cared more about appearances than what we really felt. What if she saw my vulnerability as an opportunity? Sarah approached him, gently placing her hand on his. This is terrible, Alex, but you need proof, something concrete. You can't accuse her without being sure. Alex knew she was right. As much as everything indicated that Olivia might have orchestrated the accident, he couldn't act on impulse. He needed more information, something that directly linked Olivia to the incident. But at the same time, the mere possibility that she was behind it was enough to make him doubt everything he had ever felt for her. In the following days, he continued investigating, talking to people close to him, revisiting the documents. Each new clue seemed to confirm his suspicions. The mechanic's disappearance, the financial transfers, Olivia's lack of real interest in his recovery, all pointed to a single destination. Her. Olivia, the woman he had loved and with whom he had planned to build a life, might have tried to kill him. The shock consumed him. The idea that someone could be so calculating, so cruel, devastated him. Amidst this turmoil, there was Sarah, always present, always sincere. She was the opposite of Olivia in every way, and this only made his choice clearer. But before anything, he needed to confront the truth. He was ready to face Olivia, and this time he would demand answers. The atmosphere was tense in Alex's apartment. Olivia sat across from him, her eyes fixed, but the usual confidence she displayed was visibly shaken. Alex looked at her, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. The woman he thought he knew, with whom he had once imagined a future, was now shrouded in lies and dark secrets. Olivia, I know everything. She raised an eyebrow, trying to maintain composure. What are you talking about, Alex? Her voice was cold, almost disdainful, but there was a slight tremor in it that didn't go unnoticed. Alex took a deep breath, his eyes carrying the weight of months of doubts and revelations. About the accident, about the mechanic who disappeared, the money transfers right after I was hospitalized. I know you had an interest in what would happen to me. He paused for a moment, searching for the right words. You wanted my fortune, Olivia. The marriage was just a piece in your plan. She leaned forward, now with tears in her eyes. That's absurd, Alex. How can you think that of me? I love you. I've always loved you. Her voice rose, a desperate attempt to divert the situation. Alex observed her calmly, the pain evident in his gaze. Love? Love someone? He shook his head, sad. You don't know what love is, Olivia. You always loved yourself, what status and money could give you. And the worst part is that I was blind to it for so long. Olivia stood up abruptly, anger replacing the tears. This is ridiculous. You think I orchestrated an accident, that I tried to kill you? She rubbed her hands nervously. Alex, this is madness. Don't do this to us. You're being influenced by people who don't understand what we had. Alex remained silent for a moment, watching her. He knew Olivia would try to manipulate the situation, as she always did. But this time, he wouldn't yield. He was no longer the man who allowed himself to be swayed by appearances and superficiality. I've already opened an investigation, Olivia. The authorities already know what I discovered. It won't be possible to cover anything up anymore. And you, he paused, his voice firm, won't leave the country, not until everything is clarified. Olivia approached, trying to touch Alex's face, but he pulled back. The tears now flowed down her face, but Alex knew they weren't tears of remorse. They were of desperation because she knew she had lost. I love you. Alex, she whispered. Her voice choked. You're making a mistake. I would never do this. I never wanted to hurt you. Alex looked into her eyes, finally free from the illusions he had created about her. You might even believe that, Olivia. But what you really wanted wasn't love. It was control, power, status. He took a deep breath. Now I need to move on, and you need to face the consequences of your actions. She stepped back, shocked by the coldness in his voice. Olivia left, crying as if she were the victim, but Alex knew that for the first time in a long time, He was doing what was right. After the door closed, silence filled the apartment. Alex sat on the couch, feeling the weight of the decision he had just made. It was the end of an era, the end of a life built on appearances and deception. But strangely, he felt a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. A few hours later, Sarah arrived. She knew something had happened the moment she looked at Alex. His posture was lighter, but his eyes revealed the storm he had faced. "How was it?" Sarah asked, sitting beside him. Alex sighed, running his hands through his hair. "It was difficult but necessary. I confronted Olivia. She tried to deny it, of course, but I know who she really is now." Sarah looked at him with understanding and support. "And how are you?" Her voice was soft, filled with genuine concern. Alex smiled slightly, something he hadn't done in a long time. "I'm okay. Finally, I'm okay." He looked at her, his eyes now brighter. "And that's because of you, Sarah. You showed me what true love is, what it means to genuinely care for someone." Sarah averted her gaze, a bit embarrassed by the intensity of his words. "I just did what anyone would do." Alex shook his head. "No, Sarah, you did much more. You were by my side when I needed it most, when I was vulnerable and lost. You cared for me even when I didn't know who you were. And now I see with clarity." He stood up slowly, still recovering physically but determined. Sarah watched him, curious. "What are you doing?" Alex approached her, kneeling with effort. Sarah widened her eyes in surprise. He took a small box from his pocket, something he had kept for weeks, waiting for the right moment. "Sarah, I never knew what true love was until I met you. I never knew what it was to be cared for, to be truly seen." He opened the box, revealing a simple but meaningful ring. "I want to start a new life, a life away from appearances, a life with you. And I'd like you to be my wife." Sarah remained silent for a moment, tears filling her eyes. She knew Alex was sincere, that the love he felt for her was different from anything she had ever experienced. "Alex," she whispered, trying to find the words. "Yes, of course, yes." Alex smiled, feeling a happiness he thought was no longer possible. He placed the ring on her finger, and the two embraced, happy, and kissed passionately, sealing the beginning of a new life. Alex knew there was still a long road ahead, but with Sarah by his side, he felt strong. And for the first time, he was sure he was on the right path, free from the chains of the past and ready for a future filled with true love and authenticity. Thank you for joining us on this journey of courage and transformation. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our upcoming videos. A big kiss and see you in the next story.